Are you dreaming about your first home in Canada but feeling stuck when it comes to collecting for that down payment? In this video, I'll be discussing simple yet extremely effective hacks that my clients and many Canadians are using to save thousands of dollars quickly, so you can also turn your dream home into reality. So let's get started. If you are new to this channel, my name is Navjot and my mission is to retire 1 million immigrants with $5 million. And if you want to join this mission, all you need to do is subscribe to the channel, and I promise that I'll bring amazing videos that will make you and me a lot of money. So in today's video, we'll be talking about 5 major steps that you need to take in order to save for your down payment quickly. The first one is assessing your budget and down payment goal. Now, the biggest question that I get asked is how much down payment is enough? Should I do minimum down payment? Should I do 10%? Should I do 20%? So let's do the math behind this. The first one is, let's assume that you're buying a home for $750,000. Now, I don't know your budget. We'll talk about that in a bit, how to assess your budget. But let's assume a budget is $750,000 of purchase price. Let's say you're doing a minimum down payment. The minimum down payment on this will be 5% of the first $500,000, which is $25,000. And you have to do a 10% on the remainder of the $250,000. So you only can do a 5% on the first 500. I am sure you already know this, but if you don't, that's how the math works. And on the remainder, which is anything over $200,000, which in this case is $250,000, you have to make a 10%. So that basically comes to 25 plus 25 equal to $50,000 of down payment on a $750,000 home. The total down payment, like I said, will be $50,000. The mortgage insurance, because you're doing a less than 20% down, you have to pay a 4% mortgage insurance when you do a less than 20% down. That 4% comes to $28,000, and that gets added on to your overall loan. So in this case, $750,000 is the purchase price, $50,000 is the down payment. So that brings it to $700,000 of loan plus the $28,000 of mortgage insurance. So $728,000 is your loan. Let's assume an interest rate of 4%. Now, at the time of recording this video, the interest rates are around that for an insured mortgage. So I'll take 4%. Don't go by the interest rate. Actually, just look at the differences here, because difference is what matters irrespective of the interest rate. But let's assume an interest rate of 4%. The amortization that you can get is 25 years. Now, obviously, you all know that, now insured mortgages will also come with 30-year amortizations. At the time of recording this video, that rule is not here. So I'll just go with the rule that we have right now. I have made a video on why I feel 30-year amortization is a bit of an overkill, and you'll end up paying a lot more in interest if you go for a 30-year amortization. But that is always available to you after December 15th. The monthly payment on this, assuming a 25-year amortization, will be $38.29, and your total payments in 25 years, inclusive of the interest and this mortgage insurance and the interest on top of that, will come to about $1.15 million. So a $750,000 home in 25 years will cost you about 1.15. Maybe it's more, maybe it's less. It will hopefully be worth a lot more than 1.15 and make up for it. But that's not why you buy a home. You buy a home because you want to retire in this home, or whatever your forever home is, mortgage free and rent free, and that's the reason why you buy a home. Let's do a calculation and comparison to if you were doing a 20% down payment, if you had the 20%. Total down payment, let's say, is 20%, which is $150,000 now. Mortgage insurance in this case will be $0 because you don't pay any mortgage insurance. Interest rate is slightly higher always when you are paying or you're doing a 20% down payment. The reason for that is that now the bank is liable for any losses that they make if you default on your home. Because if you are taking an insured mortgage, the insurer is insuring if you default, the insurer will pay the bank. In this case, the insurer will not pay the bank, and therefore they have to mitigate that risk, and therefore they do that by increasing the interest rate by a little bit. So let's assume that the premium that they apply is 0.2%. It could be very different depending on when you are buying, but let's say it's 0.2%. And let's say you take an amortization of 30 years, because if you do a 20% down, you can take a 30-year amortization. Now, like I said, you can take a 30-year amortization starting December or January if you do a minimum down payment as well. But let's assume that these are the numbers, and at the time of recording this video, that rule is not implemented yet. The monthly payment is a lot lower. Why? Because you're doing a much bigger down payment, so your loan is lower, and you are also taking a 30-year amortization. So yes, the interest rate is slightly higher, but that doesn't matter. Your monthly payments is still lower because you are making a bigger down payment. And the total payments across 30 years, not 25 years, because you're taking a 30-year loan, will be $1,051,560. So it will be almost $100,000 lower. So the first saving that you make when you do a 20% down payment is because you're taking a lower loan and therefore you pay a lesser interest, even though you're paying interest for 30 years, will be about $97,000 of saving in interest. And the second saving that you do is on a monthly basis because your cash outflow is a lot lower, so about $900 lower, and then you can invest that money into other investments and grow that. Now the question is, let's say you have the 20% down payment, but is it worth investing that 20% down payment all into your first home, or is it worth just doing the minimum down payment and then using the difference to invest in other assets? Let's do the math on that a little bit. Now, I'll not nerd out on the maths here. I'll just give you overall numbers, but let's assume that you had the 20% down payment, but you chose to do the 50,000, which is the minimum down payment of whatever you choose, and then you invest the remainder, which is $100,000, into a 8% fund, VFV or a S&P 500 fund that gives you 8% year-on-year return, and you do not invest a penny after this investment for 25 years. So this $100,000 at 8% year-on-year for 25 years will be worth about $700,000. But because if you compare against the 20% down payment, you are paying off your mortgage 5 years early, because here your amortization was 25 years, here it's 30 years, so you are mortgage free 5 years early, and then you invest the 3829 for 5 years and get an additional $280,000. So what I'm saying here is that because you are now not paying mortgage for 5 years, you can invest the entire mortgage amount into the S&P 500, grow that by another 8%, let's assume, for the next 5 years. You will end up with another $280,000 in investments, and overall you'll be just shy of $1 million at the end of 30 years. Again, I don't want to nerd out on the numbers, but these are just rough calculations. Now let's do a comparison of if you made the 20% down payment, but instead of investing the $100,000, which you are obviously putting in your house now because you're doing a 20% down payment, you instead invest the $900 of difference in payment every single month into the S&P 500. If you do that every single month for 25 years at 8% year-on-year return, you'll end up at $860,000. So you'll obviously be much higher than what you would end up if you invested the $100,000 upfront in 25 years. So you will be ahead if you invest every single month $900, which is the difference between the payments on a monthly basis. And by the end of 30 years, and assuming that you do not put a dollar into S&P 500 after this $860,000 will be worth $1.26 million in 30 years. So clearly you are ahead like to like if you are doing a 20% down payment versus if you do a minimum down payment. Not only do you have more money in your S&P 500 account in your stock investment, but also you save $100,000 of interest on your primary home. Now this calculation is of course true if you have the 20% down payment and if you are thinking whether to make a lower down payment and doing the maths on that basis. However, if you do not have the 20% down payment and if you are waiting for 1, 2, 3 years to save for that 20% down payment, this math may not make sense for you, because if you are assuming that you are buying a house for $750,000 today, in 1 to 2 years or 3 years, this house, the same house can be worth a lot more. And you have to, it's a moving target then. You have to do a 20% down payment of $800,000 next year. You have to do it then, if you are waiting for 2 years and the house is worth $850,000, now you have to do 20% down payment on a $850,000 house, which is a lot more. So let's assume that the house values increase in 2 years by $50,000. Now you have to do a $10,000 more down payment. So you don't just have to save $150,000, but you have to save $160,000 instead. The payments, because now you're taking a bigger loan because the house is more expensive, will be $200 more, which is $200 that you invest less into your S&P 500, and therefore this particular amount that you see here, $860,000 or 1.26, will be a lot lower. Moreover, the $97,000 of saving that you had, that also gets eroded by almost $70,000. So all of those savings that you had on your interest gets eroded because now the purchase price is higher. All this to say that if you have the 20% down and if you can do that comfortably, do it. It makes sense. However, if you have the minimum down payment right now and if you can make the payments comfortably, there's absolutely no reason why we have to stress upon saving for that 20%, because if you do the maths, it'll all balance out in the end. Now, just a side note, I always say that 10% is the magic number, and the reason is that first of all, the mortgage insurance that you have will be 3.1% and not 4% if you do a 10% down payment. If you do a 15% down payment, it will not be very significantly different. So 10% is the magic number in my view, and you also have a certain amount of equity in your home, because if you do a minimum down payment, you hardly have any equity. On the $750,000, you are taking a loan of $728,000 and you only have $22,000 of equity to start with. So I think 10% is a magic number, but Every situation is different. I would highly recommend that you book a call and make sure that you're getting the advice that you deserve for your situation. Now, the other question that you might ask is, how much can I afford and how much down payment do I need to save, and how do I do that? How do I assess? How do I plan for it? How do I track it? And therefore, I have made and I've nerded out on an Excel, and I'll explain that to you. Step number 1 on this Excel is finding the rule of 35. The rule of 35 is basically an affordability calculator that I made many years ago. I was not even a mortgage agent then. I used that to make my own purchase. But what it says is that all the cells in yellow are the ones that you have to edit. All the cells in gray, if you edit them, the formulas will go off. You just need to download it again. The description will have the link to this particular calculator. You can just download it from the website. But let's go through this calculation. So the first step that we need to do is, what's your net household income? This is your after-tax income. After all the deductions, you can include your incentives if you're getting on a monthly basis, your fixed bonuses, your side hustles. Let's say you are making YouTube videos and you're making $500, or you are doing a side hustle, you are mowing lawns over the weekend and you're making $2,000 a month. You can add all that because that's your disposable income that you have every single month. Let's assume for this particular example is $10,000. This is again after tax income, not before tax, because if you go to a bank, if you come to us, if you are doing a normal eligibility calculation, all that will happen on your pre-tax income, on your gross income. But this is net income that we are talking about. $10,000 is coming in our home. The second question that we need to answer is, are you expecting your income to increase by 10% in the next 12 months? Now, if you are getting a hike, if you're changing your job, if you are expecting, a salary hike in the next, 3 or 4 months, the appraisal season is coming, soon. If the answer is yes, you say yes here. And then you also say that, okay, if yes, then by how much? Let's assume it's by 10%. And therefore your income will be about $11,000. I'm just taking a random example. If the answer is no, just choose 0% here. How much down payment do you have? For instance, in this case, I've just taken $70,000. That's something that I feel I can, afford to save. The next question to ask, and this is something that I always recommend, is always have an emergency fund over and above your down payment and closing cost. Let's say you do not have an emergency fund here. The reason why I say that is if your roof breaks, if an AC needs to be changed, you should not be going into debt because you didn't have the emergency fund. Let's say you lose your job. The jobs can be lost, especially in this market, right? So it's important that you have certain amount of money set aside so that you're able to sustain your mortgage till the time you recover from whatever has happened to you. Let's say in this case, you do not have the emergency fund, and I'll talk about the implications of that in a bit. The first one is property taxes. That's something that everyone has to pay. Let's say that's $4,000. Again, you can change that depending on the property that you are buying. If you're buying a condo, then it'll be a little bit less. You can just change this. Monthly condo fee, let's say, is $0 in this case because you're buying a freehold property, and the maximum monthly mortgage you can afford is $3,517. The reason why this number cannot be changed is because it's an outcome of how much you are making. What I mean by that is the rule of 35 says that your household expenses, which includes your property tax, your mortgage payment, and your condo fee, if it's there, should be less than 35% of your net household income. 35% of $11,000 is $3,850. And if you deduct your monthly property taxes and condo fee, you are left with $3,517. That's the amount of mortgage that you can afford right now. Again, I've done these numbers at a 4% interest rate. The reason why I've done the 4% is because the last 25 years, the average of interest rates is between 3.5 to 4%. You can take a 3.5% as well. I just like to be conservative. And therefore, I've taken this particular number now. And based on this particular mortgage payment and the down payment that we had inputted, you get to a home purchase price of $716,000. Because now you have money set aside for contingencies, and you can actually break the rule of 35 and move on to the rule of 40, which is 40% of your household expenses. And now your budget can stretch from $720,000 to $817,000. Now, again, this is based on assuming that you don't have any other consumer debt, assuming that this is your first home, assuming that you're doing a less than 20% down. All these assumptions are here. You should always book a call. The link to book a call is also here when you're doing your eligibility, because your eligibility can be very different depending on your situation. Now that we have a home purchase value in mind, which in this case, let's say is $817,000, we go to the next step, which is the next tab, which is called income and budgeting. And we go to step number 2, which is monthly savings rate. That's where we are trying to calculate how much you are making, how much is coming into your home, and how much you are spending on other things that can be different for different people. Now, again, the blocks in yellow are the ones that you need to change. If you change anything else, then make sure that you're downloading it or you know what you are changing, because the Excel will just go off because there are a lot of formulas here. I'm not locking these formulas just because I don't want to. If this gets screwed up, just download it from the website again. So the first step is to write what your salary income is. Let's assume, like in the earlier example, it was $11,000. So we are assuming that your income is $11,000. This is again net income after taxes. If you have any other income, let's say you're making $1,000, $2,000 from a side hustle, you can actually write that. In this case, let's say it's $0, so your total income is $11,000 that's coming into your bank account after deductions and taxes. Now we talk about necessities, which is the needs. This is something that you can't live without. We can't live without rent. We can't live without a roof, right? So you include utilities, tenant insurance, Wi-Fi, whatever it takes to live in that house. Let's say that is about $2,600. Let's say you're paying about $2,400 in rent and $200 of utilities, tenant insurance, Wi-Fi, and stuff like that. So let's assume that expense is $2,600 right now. Let's say you have a car, and if you include your EMI, car insurance, fuel cost, let's say that's $1,200. Let's say you are making $600 of grocery, public transport, you're using a little bit, of Uber or whatever, when it's snowing outside, so it's $100. The phone bill, let's say, is $100. It could be a little bit higher. It depends on the plan that you use. Send money home. Let's say in this case, it's $0. Some people have to send and support their family. If you are doing that, you should input this here as well. And then there's miscellaneous needs. I don't know what goes here, but every situation is different. That's why I have a tab here. And that is, let's say, $0 here. So you are spending of the $11,000 that you're making about $4,600. That basically doesn't mean that you're saving the rest, because you have some luxuries and fun. You are traveling, you are shopping, you are eating out. So I have certain budget for this as well. Let's assume that you're shopping about $300 a month. It is on the lower side because if you are someone who, like me, who wanted to save as quickly as possible for your down payment, I was actually minimizing my shopping to almost zero. Only the necessities like buying a winter jacket, buying winter shoes, those are the kind of shoppings that we were doing. So let's assume that's $300 in this case. Eating out, we were hardly eating out. Honestly, we were making food at home because we wanted to save every penny. Plus, when we came and we were saving this, it was COVID, so we were, restaurants were closed. So blessing in disguise, but let's assume that's $100 a week for you. It's $400, and then miscellaneous wants. I don't know what goes here, but it could be travel, it could be anything. Let's assume that's $0 here, and the necessities, the luxuries and fun, which is the wants, is about $700. So your overall net expenses are $5,300. If you deduct that from $11,000 that you're making, that would come to a monthly savings of $5,700. Now that we understand what our monthly savings budget is, and we also understand how much down payment are we making, let's go to the down payment planner. That's step number 3 and the last step. Now, before I go to the last step, if you want to track these expenses, and I would highly recommend that you track these expenses, that will be one of the steps that I'll be talking about in a bit as well. If you want to track these expenses, this is an expense tracker that I used to use. Let me just explain that in a bit. This is for the month of September of, I think, 2020. And this is my actual expenses. At that time, the rent was, and this basically is 2, which is basically September 2nd is when my rent used to go. So it was about $1,900. September 1st, I had rental insurance of $29. Internet was about $28. I think September 15 utility bill of about $132. So I have date, the expense that I had and the dollar amount associated with it, and this is my living expense. Then I had grocery, which is also my living expense. That's my need, and I actually used to write every single point of grocery whenever we went. Even it's $10 of grocery at Walmart, I actually put it out. In that case, you have to go through your bank statements, you have to go through your credit card statements, and you have to be very diligently doing this. I used to do this every week. You can actually do it every month, but make sure you're tracking every single expense if you are saving for down payment, because you never know where you are spending a lot. I'll give you an example here. So let's say restaurants. So we were eating out a lot in this particular month, and we had spent almost $370, which was more than what we wanted to. We had a budget of about $200. Every 2 weeks we'll eat out, but we did eat out a lot, during this time, and we spent about $370. And that's how we know that, okay, where are we eating? Okay, we are eating a lot of pizza. That's not good for health anyways, right? So we have to, it just helps you cut down on unnecessary expenses when you have a, cheap budget to follow. Car and travel, we have the car loan, $162. It was actually 162 times 2 because it was a bi-weekly payment. So 9th and 23rd, I have this here. So I just laid out everything that I had. Shopping and entertainment, we did shop a lot, about $1,800. I have no idea what we shopped about, but I think this was the time when we actually moved into a new home, like the first condo that we moved on rent. So that's probably a lot of bidets and it was also winter was coming and we shopped for a few clothes. So yes, again, this is very important that you track, because now you know that you're spending 31% of what you're making towards your wants, which is not something that you need. Then we had miscellaneous work related expenses. We had a YouTube channel, we had some subscriptions, so we had actually written that as well. And overall we made, if you look at here, we made about $12,897 that month. and we spent about $5,855. Of that, a lot of it was our wants, which we had to cut down. We saved almost $7,000, which is a normal, like a subtraction of income minus expenses. Needs was about 2,300, wants was about 2,200, 22%, and savings was about 55%. So we were saving very well, and we were actually doing this particular tracking for every single month till the time we bought our home. I still do that in a very different way because now I have a couple of businesses and I have to track those expenses, but I'm still tracking every single thing that goes out on my credit card. I still do that to date, even though I have 2 companies and 3 personal accounts. Coming back to the down payment planner, step number 3, now that we know how to track our expenses, now that we know our monthly savings rate as well, let's look at our down payment planner. Now, approximate purchase value, I've taken that from here. It just, automatically takes from here. So let's say it's $817,000. You can actually change that. It's in yellow, but make sure that, again, the formula will go off, but you can change that. That's not a problem. How much down payment do you want to save? I would say whatever you have written here, or 10%, whichever is higher. So you can change that depending on what you want, but my recommendation is to do a 10%, and therefore I have copied it from J7 tab, which was $70,000, or 10%, whichever is higher. In this case, 81,727, which is 10% of the purchase value. Again, if you change this can also change. The minimum down payment which is required, again, like I said, 5% of the first 500, and the remainder where you have to do a 10%. So that it will be 56,000 or just shy of $57,000. That's the minimum down payment that you require. But like I said, I personally want to do a 10%. Are you buying in Alberta? The reason why this is important is because if you're buying in Alberta, your closing costs will be just $2,000. You don't have any land transfer taxes. You don't have any major expenses apart from your lawyer fees when you're buying in Alberta. But if you're not buying in Alberta, and I don't know why this is not changing. Okay, yeah, if you're not buying in Alberta, your closing costs will be about 1.5% of your purchase price if you are buying your first home, because you get a land transfer tax rebate in most provinces. Let's assume that is about $12,000 in your case. Minimum upfront cost needed will be $12,000 plus the minimum down payment, which is $68,000. But if you choose to do 10% down payment, then your target upfront funds needed will be 81 and change plus the 12,000 and change, which comes to $93,000. Now that we understand how much money do we need upfront, let's go on to our current savings and shortfall. Now you have to just write what you have in your savings account here. Your savings account, high interest savings account, your GICs, everything goes here. Let's say you have $5,000 there. You have an RRSP account which has $10,000. Again, you can actually count both of your RRSPs. So, if you're 2 people buying, you can count all the RRSPs that you have. That's, let's say, $10,000. FHSA is $16,000 because you can put $8,000 per person. I'm assuming this is a family of 2 and you both have put $8,000 each, at least for 1 year. So let's say that's $16,000. And if you're getting gift from family, you can write something here. But if you're not, let's say in this case, you're not, then your current savings, total current savings are $31,000. This can be very different depending on your situation. Down payment shortfall is a simple calculation. The minimum would be 68 minus 31, which is about $37,000 or $38,000. And if you are targeting a 10% down payment, then 93 minus 31, which is about 62,000 and change. At the current rate of monthly savings, which is $5,700, you have to save $38,000. That will take about 7 months to buy the home with a minimum down payment. And if you are going for a 10% down, then it will take about 11 months. So now I understand how much it takes, or how much money would it take, or how much time would it take, to save for my down payment. Now, let's assume that you say that, I'm going to pick another job or a freelance project of $4,000. If you're 2 people, let's say both of you pick, like part-time jobs and you make $4,000 extra, these numbers will change because now your monthly savings rate has increased to almost $10,000 and you can buy a home in 4 months and 6 months depending on how much down payment you want to make. So that's how this particular Excel can be changed, and this is how I feel we can actually plan for our down payment to buy our first home. Like I said again, these numbers can be very different for you depending on your situation. So do book a call from this particular link that you have on this Excel, or you can go on my website, growwithnab.com, book a call, and you can book a call and someone from my team can call you and do an actual eligibility check and give you an entire plan on how to buy a home. And you don't have to book a call if you're buying a home in the next couple of months. If you're ready right now, you can definitely book a call in advance so that you are taking the right steps based on your situation in order to achieve your objective of home ownership in 2025 or 2026. All right, so now that we have assessed our budget, we are doing the budgeting, we know our down payment goal, we know how much we are eligible for, you should save everything into an dedicated savings account. You need to open a dedicated savings account, but because if you're saving everything in your checking account where you're doing your expenses, your needs and wants, you will end up spending a lot more money. So it's important that you open a dedicated savings account. I would recommend not investing this money. That's one of the reasons why I do not count my TFSA money as part of my down payment. You can, there's nothing wrong with that. But I would recommend, if you are saving for a home in the next 12 months at least, you should not be investing any of your money in the stock market, in Bitcoin, in whatever hype that you see right now. Do not invest that money if the goal is to buy a home in the next 12 months. Everything should go into a high interest savings account. You can use EQ Bank, you can use your bank's savings account if it's giving good interest rate. I'll give you another hack to do that. But use an account with high interest rates to grow your money while keeping it safe. That's very important, while keeping it safe. Automate savings, set up an automatic transfer to this account. If you think that you can save $3,000, $4,000, whatever that money is, you should set that aside and put that automatically into this particular home related account, the high interest savings account, and you do it consistently. Now, this is something that I got to know very late in life. There is an ETF, and if you don't know what an ETF is, I'll highly recommend that you search on Google. I have made many videos on this, but there's an ETF called Global X High Interest Savings ETF. In the last 5 years, it's not grown a lot because it's a high interest savings account. It gives a dividend of about 4.96% every single year. And I have started to park my money. If I have to put it in a high interest savings account, instead of doing it in EQ Bank where the interest rates fluctuate a lot, I'm actually starting to put into this global ETF, which is a high interest savings account ETF. And it's giving me about 5% return every single year. It was a lot higher last year, but right now it's giving me 4.96 or almost 5% return. The beauty of this is that you can buy this ETF inside of your TFSA. So if you're putting $100,000 of your down payment into this ETF within your TFSA and it grows by 5%, you just got $5,000 in 1 year, and you do not have to pay any tax when you withdraw it because you have done in your tax-free savings account. That's a small little hack that I'll recommend everyone can do. That said, you can also do a GIC within your TFSA, but I'll not recommend investing in actual stock market within the TFSA if you are wanting to use that money for your down payment, because the market can be very variable in the short run. If I were you, I would just do this inside of my TFSA and keep the money growing at 5% and withdraw it tax-free because I've done it in my TFSA account. Step number 3 is leverage your tax advantaged accounts, which is RRSP and FHSA. Let me explain. The first one is the home buyers plan, which is an RRSP plan. If you're buying your first home, this is for you. What is it? Withdraw from your RRSP to buy your first home. This is an account where you can put your money, invest your money, and you can take that money out tax-free if you're buying your first home. The advantage of investing in RRSP is because when you invest, let's say $10,000 in RRSP, you also get a tax return because this money that you put in RRSP is tax deductible. I'll talk about an example in the next slide, but you'll actually get free money if you invest money into RRSP. I'll give you an example. The withdrawal limit on this one is $60,000 tax-free, and it is per person. So if you are a family of 2 buying a home, you can each withdraw $60,000 if you have invested $60,000. You have to return it back within 15 years, and the repayment has to start 5 years from when you withdraw. And that's amazing because you don't have to pay any interest when you put it back. It's almost like you giving me money for 15 years, and I have to return the same amount of money with no inflation adjustment to you in 15 years. So that means it's a really big win if you take inflation into consideration. The eligibility is it's tax-free only if the money was put into RRSP 90 days prior to withdrawal. But the big thing that we need to note is, and especially this time of the year, if you're buying a home in February and if you're trying to put the money right now into RRSP to take tax advantage of it, make sure that you have that money kept into the RRSP account for 3 months before withdrawing. So if you want that money for less than 3 months or in less than 3 months, do not invest the money in RRSP because then you'll have a tax liability to pay for. That's RRSP. Let's talk about FHSA, which is another amazing. I think it's a really good combination. You should do both. Everyone who's buying a home should do both. What is it? You can contribute $8,000 per year per person if you're a family of 2, $16,000 per year, and the lifetime limit is $40,000 per person. Unused contribution can carry forward into the following year up to a max of $8,000. So let's say you open an FHSA account this year, but you do not invest $8,000 because you don't have $8,000. Next year, you can actually put $16,000 in the account. So make sure, even if you don't have the money, if you are trying to buy a home, let's say in the next 5 years, make sure you're at least opening your FHSA account so that you have the contribution limit to put into it next year. And I'll talk about the advantage of this doing this in a bit. You don't need to pay it back ever, and it is tax-free if you take it out. So it's a best of RRSP and TFSA. And if you don't use it, let's say you don't buy a home, you can just transfer this into your RRSP and be happy. Eligibility is first time home buyer and primary residence. That's the eligibility for it. And you don't necessarily have to withdraw this money before you close your home. You can actually do this within 30 days of moving into your home. And there's actually no time limit on when you can put the money. Let's say you're closing a home in the next 30 days. You can actually put the money today and withdraw it the next day. And you'll still get the advantage, the tax advantage of putting the $8,000 towards your FHSA. Let's talk about the actual money, the free money that you get by doing these two things without investing your money into nothing, right? Let's say your gross income is $100,000. So that's your gross income. I'm talking about a single person here. You can talk about a family as well, but let's take a single person example. RRSP contribution is $0. This person does not make any RRSP contribution. This person does not make any FHSA contribution as well. The total tax that he pays plus CPP plus EI will be about $26,136. After tax income is $73,864. Let's assume that the other person number 2, is now making the same amount of money, but they are making $10,000 of RRSP contribution, and they're also maxing out their FHSA contribution at $8,000. The total tax plus CVP plus EI that they pay is almost $5,500 less. So they are paying far less tax because these contributions are tax deductible. The after-tax income is a lot higher, and they get a tax return of almost $5,400. That's money in your pocket. That's a check that CRA gives you for making these contributions, and you still have this money. So this is basically free money that you are getting. Let's assume that you double your RRSP contribution to $20,000. If you have that, your overall tax liability reduces a little bit more, and therefore you now get a tax return of $8,500. And then you can invest this into TFSA, let's say in that ETF that I talked about at 5%, and this $8,500 grows into $9,000, and you withdraw this tax-free in 1 year and use it towards your down payment. That's why I said that RRSP and FHSA is a must-do for anyone who is planning to purchase a home. And even if you are not planning to purchase a home, there's nothing to lose because you can always move your FHSA into your RRSP and withdraw it when you retire. So there's absolutely no reason why you would not use these two vehicles, because it is actually giving you free money that can then be used again towards your down payment. Create a budget and stick to it. Cut large expenses. Earlier in the video, I talked about the expense tracker. Make sure you're using that expense tracker. Now, you must have heard about the 50-30-20 rule. 50% goes towards needs, 30% goes towards wants. Savings is whatever is left, let's say 20% in this case. That's the wrong way of doing budgeting. The right way of doing budgeting in this inflationary environment is that you save 20% first. Save 20% first. Don't think of needs and wants. Save 20% first. And whatever is left after, the 80% that's left after goes into needs and wants. And if you're left with $0 for wants, so be it. That basically means that we are not making enough money. So don't prioritize needs and wants over savings, especially if you're saving for your first home. Now, a couple of things that we did to cut down on our wants was we cut subscriptions. We canceled unused subscriptions or memberships. There are a lot. If you look at your credit card, if you're tracking it using the expense tracker, you'll know that you have a lot of subscriptions that you don't need. Every dollar matters here. Limit dining out and opt for home cooked meals because you can actually save a lot of money doing that. Frugal shopping, look for deals, look for coupons, buy secondhand when possible. Go to marketplaces and buy something off the marketplace. You can actually get things for 50 cents on the dollar if you do that. Be as frugal as possible because every dollar counts, and every dollar that you don't spend on your wants goes towards your down payments. I'm not trying to be miser here. You should enjoy your life. I'm not saying you should not, but the objective here is to save down payment as soon as possible, and you need to make certain choices which sometimes are hard. And if you are like me, I did not want to give up on one thing, which was travel. That was a want that I absolutely needed. And therefore, I focused on my strengths to improve my income so that I can actually take about 5 to 10% out for my travels. There is no magic pill to this. You need to choose your hustle based upon your strength. Now, a lot of people look at me and say, oh, mortgage is a really good career. Let me become a mortgage agent. But that's not probably your strength. Probably your strength is tech. Probably your strength is selling cars. Probably your strength is, like handwork. You are a good handyman. When you are thinking of making $500 to $1,000, $2,000 a month, and you're not thinking of scaling a business, you first need to look at your strengths and do something, double down on them, because that's the fastest way of making money. I can bet you one thing. Being a mortgage agent for 4 years now, a new mortgage agent would make less money than if you decide to mow other people's lawns or shovel other people's snow on weekends. You can actually make more money in a year than being a new mortgage agent. So don't look at other people. Don't look at other people's strengths. Don't look at that they are making so and so money, because there's a lot of history behind that. Look at your strengths and use those to make the $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, because it's not hard if you double down on your strengths. How can I earn an additional $1,000 if I were to do this all over again? I would be an expert in one thing and teach that online. Now, I have spent about 12 years in corporate. I have hired so many people. I have, led teams of over 40 people across 18 countries, and I know how hiring works. I know how job market works, irrespective of whether it's Canada, US, whatever, right? So I started something called as the First Job Accelerator. I was good at teaching, and I had a social media following, and therefore I started teaching people for $200 per person. In one class, I was making anywhere between $1,000 to $2,000, and I was doing 2 classes a month. So that's how I was making $3,000 to $4,000 a month of additional money when we were saving for our down payment. And I was becoming an expert in one thing, which is how to find your first job in Canada. And I was teaching it online. The second thing that I would do if this was not working was flip things on Facebook Marketplace. You can find some amazing things of these value stores. You can also find some amazing things on Facebook Marketplace, and you can just refurbish that and sell it. You can actually make a good profit out of it. Easily can make $1,000 a month. Editing reels for other people, other business owners. If I were to do it all over again, I would edit reels for other business owners, for realtors, for mortgage agents. I see a lot of people making $700, $800, $1,000, $2,000, even when they are just starting out. And it's not very difficult to learn how to edit reels, especially in a world of AI, which it's made it very simple. I also did freelance projects for startups. So I was using LinkedIn. I am a researcher by profession. I've done that for 10 years. And I picked that as a skill because I was really good at it, and I then started reaching out to startups and doing one free project for them, and then I started making about $3,000 to $5,000 every single month during recession when I did not have a job. So that's something that you can do if you are, let's say, a tech person, if you are someone who develops websites, if you are someone who is good at CRM. Just pick people or companies or startups who need help, and obviously there's no magic bullet to this. You have to decide your own audience, but that's something that I would do if I were to leverage LinkedIn to make $1,000 every single month. I was making $3,000 to $5,000 from month number 2. I think the first month I did a couple of free projects, but then I had 3 clients and they were paying almost $5,000 a month by the end of 2020. I would paint homes over the weekend. Now, we painted our first home and we really did not like it, but if push comes to shove, I will actually paint homes over weekend. You can actually make about $1,000 to $2,000 per weekend if you do that. That's something that I would do if I were you. And the 6th one, and this is my favorite right now, is mowing lawns and shoveling snow in an expensive neighborhood. I'll go to double garage home, neighborhoods in your neighborhood, and I'll just knock doors and ask them if you want their lawns to be mowed. And right now, because it's snowing, I'll ask them if they want their snow, snow shoveled. I have a kid. There's a kid who came to my previous house, and he used to, shovel snow for $25 per shovel. This was less expensive than I was paying $40 almost, per shovel. Now I have a company who does it, every time there's 1 inch or 2 inches of snow that happens. But that kid was making $500 a weekend by shoveling snow in his own neighborhood on foot. That's it. He was like 12 years old, 13 years old, and he was making $500 a weekend shoveling snow. If he can do it, we can too. I hope this video was helpful. The link to the down payment planner is in the description. You can download that and start using it. If you like this video, share it with a friend who is also saving for the down payment. And if you have not already subscribed to the channel, there are amazing videos that I'll be coming up in 2025. In fact, I'm increasing the frequency of videos to twice a week instead of once a week. There'll be amazing content which will be there on this particular channel. So stay tuned and subscribe to the channel. मिलते हैं अगली वीडियो में. तब तक के लिए bye bye.